This program is brought to you by Emory University.
I'm Randall Burkett. I'm the curator of African American collections in the Manuscript Archives and Rare Book Library here at Emory University, and it's a great pleasure to welcome you to the program this evening. I hope you've all had a chance, but if you haven't, once the program is over, make sure you take a look at the wonderful exhibition in the Shatton Gallery, And the Struggle Continues, SCLC's Fight for Social Change. And the exhibition is drawn from more than 1,000 boxes of SCLC papers that we have in marble, all of which has been processed and are available for research. So we want you to come and use that collection. We have these materials because we want them used by you, whether you're a scholar or just someone who's interested in the subject. The finding aids are available, the guides to the collections are available online, but also in the reading room of marble up on the 10th floor. I want to say a special word of thanks to Sarah Quigley, and you could wave. Sarah is the person whom we hired to oversee the processing of this enormous collection. And when the collection was thoroughly processed, she and Professor Anderson, Carol Anderson, and you could say hello, co-curated with Michael Hall and one of our graduate students this terrific exhibition. The exhibition will be up through December 6th. We've extended it for a week, and in fact, on the 3rd of December, we'll have Bernard Lafayette in a creativity conversation with Professor Anderson, and that will be Tuesday in this same room on the 3rd of December. So please come back for that as well. One of the extraordinary privileges and pleasures of the job that I have as curator of African American collections is that I get to meet some of the most interesting people in the world. Doris Derby is in the audience. We have a great civil rights activist and photographer, and we have Doris's papers. C.T. Vivian, we don't have his papers, but we have wonderful books from his collection, and we have wonderful material about him in the SCLC collection. I met Reverend Vivian soon after I came to Atlanta through the good offices of David McCord, a rare book dealer who has had a long association, David somewhere in the room, with Reverend Vivian. And the first program that I organized was a roundtable of what I could find as the best. I said to David, I want the best collectors of rare Afro-Americana in Atlanta to see if we could borrow some of their books, do an exhibition, and then have a symposium on collecting. And the people that he recommended to me were William H. Cleveland, Bill Cleveland, and Michael Lomax, who is now the head of the United Negro College Fund, and Reverend Dr. C.T. Vivian. Of course, what this meant was that I got to go to each of their homes and look at their libraries and lust after the lovely items in their collection and pick out with them the things that I thought would be great for the exhibition. We've had a great association, Dr. Vivian and Emory and Special Collections. The next major program that we did was a performance of God's Trombones. We filled Glenn Memorial with a wonderful audience. We have terrific James Weldon Johnson papers in Special Collections. And with the help of the late beloved Richard Long, we identified 8 of the most interesting preachers we could find in Atlanta to do the 7 sermons and the intro. It was an extraordinary program. The first person I asked was Reverend Vivian. He said, I will do it if I can do Go Down Death. And I said, well, you're on. And in fact, I brought a copy of Case the Conversation Lags. Reverend Vivian is and which you can imagine it might well do. He is a lover of poetry. He's a lover of rare books. He's a wonderful preacher, and of course, he's a lover of social justice, which is why he got the extraordinary honor that he received last evening. I will say, even before I came to Atlanta, and before I knew him, I was competing against him because we both were working, when I used to collect for myself, Reverend Vivian and I were using the same rare book dealer, Phil McBlain, and I would get the catalog and call up and say, well, I'd like such and such. He said, oh, well, there's some minister in Atlanta who's already ordered that book. I'm very sorry, it's no longer available. I said, well, and of course, he wouldn't tell me the name, but later we learned our shared passion. I am thrilled to say that more than 130 of some of the rarest books in his library have come to Marble. A Benjamin Banneker almanac from 1793, his copy of Clotel, the first full-length novel by an African-American, Harriet Wilson's Our Nig, one of the earliest novels written by an African-American woman, wonderful Langston Hughes material. So and if you go to the Emory, the online catalog, and just type in C.T. Vivian, up will pop all of the books that show former owner C.T. Vivian. And we would love to keep adding to that list as opportunity presents itself. But I wouldn't want to be lobbying on this lovely occasion. I would just say what a pleasure it is to have him here and here tonight. We know how tiring it was, but I'm sure this may be a more interesting crowd than, well, maybe I shouldn't go there. I will just say it's my pleasure to introduce Dorothy Brown, who is the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and Professor of Law at the Emory Law School, and she'll bring greetings on behalf of the Provost and the President, and then introduce Andra Gillespie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It is my distinct privilege and honor on behalf of the Provost and the President to welcome Reverend C.T. Vivian to Emory University this evening. The Provost is extremely disappointed that she could not be here to welcome you. And as a good member of her staff, I should be disappointed that she's not here to welcome you. However, since this is truly going to be one of the highlights of my job, I am kind of glad she's not here to welcome you. I also want to congratulate you on receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom Award yesterday.
I want to thank
you. And I hope that you asked the president what took him so long. I'm wearing two hats tonight. The other part of me is a professor of law, and before I take my seat, I want to leave Reverend Vivian with a homework assignment. I was reading his book, Black Power and the American Myth, and came across an interesting passage. Quote, "Racism began as rationalization. It began as a justification of the white man's injustice to the black. The greed that brought black men into slavery was not alone enough to make the institution bearable to the white conscience. Spurious anthropology was created. Heretical theology was contrived. History was rewritten. Law was remade to fit new customs. These constructs provided the framework for viewing blacks as something less than human," close quote. Reverend Vivian's words for me implicate all of higher education. Emory University is a place where courageous inquiry leads. So that got me thinking. I noticed that Reverend Vivian's book was published in 1970. I think it's time for Reverend Vivian to write his next book. That is my homework assignment. And I invite you, Reverend Vivian, to consider Emory University as the place to do it from. I kind
Boy, you.
I kind of like the ring to Reverend C.T. Vivian, scholar in residence at Emory University. Emory University, where courageous inquiry leads, and Reverend Vivian will help us. Our next speaker will be Emory's incomparable Dr. Andra Gillespie, the author of The New Black Politician, Cory Booker, Newark and Post-Racial America, published by NYU Press. She will come and introduce Reverend C.T. Vivian. Thank you.
That's you. Okay, good.
Well, first, I'd like to add to my congratulations. It's an honor to sit here with you and to ask you a few questions. So the format that we're going to use this evening is I'll ask a few brief questions, and then I will open the floor up to questions from the audience. Sure. So for those who may not know Reverend Vivian that well, and I'm sure that's very few people here, I wanted to start off with the start of your activist career. So you were sitting in Peoria, Illinois in 1947, some 13 years before the Greensboro sit-ins. What inspired you to protest then, and who were your role models?
It's all three of them at once. but questions I meant. Number one is, the short answer is, I'm Black in America. And that should be enough to make anyone who is want to get rid of racism. And in the process, be involved in defending and helping every other Black person that exists in the world. I don't mean just here and now or then for us, all right? I mean in the world, because we came from all over the world, and we're a part of that, right? And there is no way that there can be an escape. Now, and let me just give you the kind of story for a night like this. You know, I remember coming across a book in my grandmother's library. And I was playing marbles underneath it, all right? I was marble champion of my county. But to do that, you got to keep going all winter, right? So I had a place underneath her bookcase that stood up, where I could make a frame around it and shoot a marble, right? And then when I ran out of marbles, I could bring them to me, right? Well, raising up from there, I saw a book on the shelf, and I didn't know anything about it before, so I was very concerned to know about it, and I took it off the shelf, and I was looking at it and trying to figure out, because it had pictures and then about 3 pages of each one of them, about each one of them, and then you just kept turning and reading. And my grandmother came by, and she looked over my shoulder, and she wasn't much taller than I was. Right? I'm about 12 years old, but she just had a lot more force than I did, right? And so, and she looked and she said, "Those are race men." I didn't say a word, but I've never forgot the word she said, right? It was deep. And the book I'm talking about, and I don't know why it's not coming to me, it's about that thick. Men of Mark. And I couldn't, and there's 3 women in there too, I want you to know. All right. Okay, but, and Men of Mark, and I never did read all of them, right? But I read enough to let me know why my grandmother said exactly what she said, right? Is that, and then she just walked on off and because she was going toward the kitchen. She was coming out of one room into the other to get to the kitchen. And she walked on into the kitchen. I didn't say anything, right? But that impressed me as knowing what it meant without further ado, without further conversation, without any questions being asked. I knew precisely what she meant, right? And one of the first books I got when I started collecting was Men of Mark, right? I pulled it off the shelf the day before yesterday, right? Well, 3 days ago, because I wasn't here the day before yesterday. It was 3 days ago. And just because I ran across it. And each time I do, I pull it off the shelf, right? And now, what was the rest of that question?
So it was who inspired you and what were your role models?
Okay, well, I was inspired at home. I was inspired at church. I was inspired by everybody who talked about the issue, right? Is because and early, all right. And that has to be seen because when you and I was in a little town, I didn't see real intense suffering, but I saw that I was well liked, but it was very clear that the brothers and sisters who were there were not. And a lot of us have had that experience. And we didn't say nothing, but we knew it. And we knew that we were the fortunate ones, huh? But that didn't mean that they were good. It just meant that you had been picked out. And that and the mere fact of picking someone else to treat well while you mistreated the rest was something that you did not desire, and you knew sooner or later you were going to speak to, right? And I did that later on, right? Because that's how it starts. That's how it keeps going, right? And then you come to a point that you know that you've got to make that change, but somehow you know you've got to make it not for you, but for everybody, right? Because you know that as long as they mess with anybody, they're going to mess with you, right? And it makes all the difference in the world. And my first, and we had a decent school. It was great for its time. That's why my family moved. Now remember, this was going on in the process. Is that my family moved from Missouri and came to Illinois because it was during the Depression and they'd lost everything, right? So, as my grandmother said, there was no reason to stay, but the only thing they had left that was precious. But my grandmother loved education. I mean, that was it. The one thing she disliked in her life was the fact that her brother was able to go to Lincoln University, but she was not, right? And as a result of that, he was the first to graduate. But he didn't love learning as much as my grandmother. My grandmother made it up, and all of this is meaningful in terms of the questions, although it seems like it. It doesn't seem like it. But all of it became important because my grandmother had taught me the first 3 grades before I even got to Illinois, right? And so it gave me time to deal. Now the racial thing, right? The racial thing, which, see, it all fits together. All of our lives, everything about our lives is affected by that one thing of racism, right? I don't care who you are, if you are black in America, right? And this is one of the better places if you really ask a lot of questions, right? But the point being is, it is the one you're in. And it's in the one that is destroying you and the people you see and you look at and you know, huh? And then when you see somebody like Mr. Daniels, who there's 2 Mr. Daniels. One's his son, and I want to call him Mr. Daniels in this case, because he was being destroyed and finally left his family, right? And you know why he left. It's because he couldn't be treated well anywhere he went. And he didn't have much, and he didn't have a good education. And he had to put up with, for the sake of his children. And then he got to the point that he couldn't do it anymore. And that's why that when people say, and they won't work, and all the other kinds of things you hear out of white mouths that don't know anything about what black life is like, right? I don't care what your problem is if you're white, add color. And you will just begin to know what it means to live in this democratic society that is so Christian.
So you mentioned of Mr. Daniels in your community. I want to switch to talk about another Daniels. So I'm thinking of Lee Daniels, who directed The Butler this summer. And in that movie, you see the depiction of the Nashville Student Association trainings, and you were active in that movement, and you were active in those trainings. So I was curious, what was different about Nashville from your initial sit-in protests in Peoria?
I started to say, was I? But what was different, but the real question, what was different?
About Nashville than Peoria.
Than Peoria?
Yeah.
First place, it was north, not south.
Okay.
All right. Peoria was north. In the second place, the law was in our favor, but the culture was not. And here, even the law nor the culture was in your place. And the other thing about it is, they did not mind killing you in the South. They would ignore you in the North, all right? Those are givens, right? And practically any place you go in the country, North, South, black, white, is basically the same.
So you talk about the fear of death. I watched an interview that you did online, and I noticed that you talked about your fearlessness, and I admire that greatly. And I wonder what I would have done in that situation. So I just wanted to know, what source of strength did you tap into to be so courageous and to be so fearless?
See, is that all of us went to church. See, our understanding of what's right and wrong is all that saved us. In other words, is that if you were black and went to church, you knew who was right and who was wrong, all right? And you knew what evil was, okay? And so anytime they try to tell you, you're no good, we knew who was no good, right? We knew it at every level, okay? And we knew the difference between decent and good white people and those who weren't so good but thought they were, right? And those who really hated you and knew it and liked it. All right. So the breakdown becomes a necessity for dealing. All right. Well, what's the next one?
Well, so, when I was thinking about Nashville, you were 36 during the Nashville campaign, and most of the students that you were working with were 18, 19, 20, 21 years old. And as somebody who studies intergenerational dynamics in African-American politics, I was very curious about your role as an elder statesman during the Nashville campaign.
Statesman is right.
What can we learn from you about younger and more seasoned people working together for a common cause?
I tell you what, is that none of us were political enough. See, I know, having written what she wrote, I know it was coming up sooner or later. We might as well get to it, right? None of us were political enough. None of us had been trained in real politics. None of us understood the power until we were much older. Because I learned earlier and was older, right, is the only real difference in terms of Nashville, in terms of schools, in terms of the action, in terms of framing it and putting it together. Okay. You see what I mean? Yeah. Is that, and for many of the students, The idea was for the first time in their lives they felt freedom at all, right? And they had never been able to talk back to their parents about saying, don't say nothing, don't say nothing, don't say nothing, because those white people will kill you, all right? And we knew it was the truth. Those who lived here knew it was the truth. I had been freed from that for a long time, and I loved saying what I thought the audience understood, right? Whether anybody else liked it or not, because I knew that it was underneath everything that was going on, right? And here were people, young people that no longer had to live in that community or no longer worry about how their behavior would cause their parents to be treated, and didn't have to worry about swallowing a lot of mess because they didn't want their parents to be hurt, all right? And because this system will destroy, just step out. You step out of line, they want to destroy your great-grandparents. I think I'm right.
So let me ask about the end of the civil rights movement. I know you've been critical of Black politics in the wake of the civil rights movement. Is there anything that you would have done differently to set up the political landscape differently after the heyday of the civil rights movement?
You always keep going with that which brought you over. And if you don't understand that, you probably wouldn't make a good husband. Right? But the real point is that the one critical thing to me is as soon as they got rid of nonviolent direct action. All right? And that's what brought us over. That's what made Martin great. That's what made it possible for us to move at all. All right? Is that that's what it took to show the nation what the South was really like. Right? And nonviolence does it. And in fact, nonviolence fits our moral and spiritual understanding. And that's what has to be understood, that Martin King ran a moral and spiritual movement, right? It was not a political movement. It was a moral and spiritual movement. That's basic, okay? Is that our moral and spiritual understandings made it possible for us to be politically viable, all right? We would not have been if it hadn't been for, right? Is that we always had to take second. You see, what Martin and nonviolence did was so important. For the first time in Black America's lives, of 400 years in this nation, for the first time, we could say no to white people. See, because if they didn't like it, you could get up and go out and demonstrate again. If you didn't get what you wanted, you could demonstrate until you got it. You could make life miserable for both of us. But the way we would do it, we were happy to be miserable, all right? And that makes a lot of difference, Doc. When the sister got off the bus and walked down the street, everybody else had followed her. It made it clear they didn't mind. And then you found a lot of white women who didn't have a maid anymore, who was very glad to come and get them, which made it difficult for them. And it's still a little difficult for us, but not nearly as much, right? When you know that you're getting after the other, right? Is that we knew that even if we died in the action, God is right. And white doesn't get you right, all right? We knew it, right? And that's what you got to see. Our movement was a black-white understanding, but it taught us a higher set of religion at the same time it taught you. All right? Got to see that, is that nonviolence is basic to restructuring this nation, right? And because somebody's got to live a better life publicly in spite of and because of, if America's ever to be anything it says it is, right? But if America would just be loving and truthful and just, right? The rest of the world would follow, huh? But you can't kill people and expect them to like you, all right? You can't steal what in some clever way, and expect them to like you and even believe you. Everybody in the world knows that we hate anybody that's not white. Hmm? Very few don't, huh? Because, and see, hate's a strong word, but I use it to catch white attention, all right? Is because until you catch the attention, nobody will ask themselves, am I really that bad? And you know people that are, whether you are or not, huh? And the hardest thing to do is to get one white man to tell another white man that he's a racist. And yet, that is necessary for a cure, right? It's necessary for a cure. He's got to face the fact, right? Because Jesus, the profound simplicity of Jesus, right? That's the next sermon. But you see, and it's really so simple, is that just tell the truth. Huh? There's only 3 important words in all of this stuff, huh? And is truth, justice, and that word that Paul said is the high point of all of them, love. Hmm? And each one of those others is basic to other religions as we were coming down that long millions of years path to learn how to live with one another. In fact, I heard a woman say yesterday, day before, whichever, is that, because it all runs into each other, and she's a feminist. Oh, I know who it was. Last night, the night before last, right, is, what's her name? Gloria Steinem. And you know what she said? She says she's, her new book, I think it's her new one, but about 100, she studied 100 cultures, right, and found out that their top people believe that you can, by how people treat their wives and their female children, is how you realize how violent that society will be.
Let me ask about your continued activism. So you have remained active, creating...
And that goes for black or white.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
You've remained active in trying to combat structural racism. You've been active in educational movements. In particular, you created the movement that became the prototype for Upward Bound. And we often talk today about achievement gaps in American education between Black and Latino students and white and Asian students. What would you recommend to help reduce or narrow those gaps?
Well, now, but this is really, they say, oh, well, you've got this wonderful prize. What would you like to do now, right? Well, the point is, I don't think any of these things that are awards are of any value if it doesn't help you help somebody. You know what I mean? I mean, you've already lived your part of it so that you can, and they get the award. But in a sense, nothing buys you off. You see, they didn't give it to you to stop doing what you're doing. They gave it to you to keep doing what you've been doing, right? So given that, My concern is that we got 1 million black men in jail. We've got 40% of our kids dropping out of school, and some places higher, I mean, and the point being is, you can't have a people with 40% of them going uneducated in a world where that the average American can't keep up with the rest of the people in the world. And then you're going to have 10% of your American population that is not able to read well, hasn't been challenged, doesn't really have a chance to fulfill their potential in what's supposed to be a good society, and forgets that we're in competition with the world, which says, and they're saying, racism is more important than my competition with the world. That's really what's being said, right? Now, when we look at that, we've got to do it. They're not going to do it, right? So because they just don't. I mean, the point is, especially if you're talking about people in jail, right? Because they were bad people, aren't they? And all we know is good and bad, right? And then you got very levels of it in terms of the ones you like and the ones you don't, right? Now, when we think of that, that's what I think is the number one problem that black people we should be doing for black people and with black people, whether they like it or not, all right? Is that there's ways of going about it. We can start with those that shouldn't be in jail in the first place, all right? And we know it, right? Like a guy that's been arrested the last 3 times for piddling stuff and wasn't really arrested for murder of a 17-year-old child, and he's got a gun on his hip. And all of us know how bad that is. That itself is enough to have a movement behind if we respected our lives as much as we should, all right? Because that's what it is disrespect for life, right? And until that's taken care of, nothing else really has meaning. Either you respect life, shall we say, if you disrespect life, you can't love God. And you have to ask the other question, can you be a racist and a Christian at the same time? Right? And can you talk about having officers of a church who are racist by their very action, all right, and still allow them to call themselves Christians? All right. Something's very wrong with that, all right? Is that, and it's unworkable. And a racist who thinks so, he really doesn't know anything about God. The very center stuff of Christianity is love. And we don't do enough of it with or without racism, right? Right? I don't care who you are. Is that when we really understand how powerful God really is, if we really understood, we'd pray differently. We got patterns of prayer, and we call it public prayer at seminary. But is it prayer? My mother used to say it didn't get above the ceiling.
So related to K through 12 education, I know you were very instrumental in helping to find bridge funding for Morris Brown College, and there are a lot of people who look at the state of a lot of historically black colleges and universities today, and some look at the financial straits that some of them are in, and then they question the relevance of them in a more integrated society, in a society where places like Emory have access for people of color. How important are historically black colleges and universities today?
Listen, as as important as we make them, right? And if you don't want important colleges, period, right? Then you'll play down or won't give to or say something else is better, so let me run over here, right? Instead of making that school, right? And what I love about what's the name of that school you See, but that's the thing I love about Morehouse, right? I try to get all three of my sons to go. I couldn't get one because he had cerebral palsy, but I try to get both of the others, and didn't really want it in some false excuse. But I'd already too early told them that you can just pick out any school you want, and your father will support you. And I didn't realize how many times I wanted to take that back. Because I think it's the best school in the nation for a black man, right? Young or older, right? Because it produces men, and it produces black men, right? Somewhere there's got to be a source for it, because there's no white school in America that produces black men. Oh, they can produce very capable men, right? But they'll be individuals, and individualism will control their lives, right? And we haven't been far enough outside of a racist society to think that all of us should be in anything but black schools. Now, you asked the first part of that about going out and raising, but you see, you know why I had to do that? It was a black city council that was going to let the oldest black school that we started and we ran by ourselves go down the drain because we couldn't pay because it couldn't pay a tax that they control. Not white people, black people, all right? See, I mean, when you get down to it, right? You know, TUI, to it, is when you get down to it, it is not a matter of black and white, it's a matter of values, all right? And if you're willing to let the only thing you got that's really worth something and the oldest thing you got, the first thing black people wanted to do when they came out of slavery was to get an education. And we called them colleges before we knew that they were grade schools, and didn't care because we were not dealing with what was here now. We were dealing with what was going to be, all right? All of that was the hope that says, in spite of, we're going to be what we write on that board, right? We're going to be what we call the school, right? We call it a college, right? And then pretty soon we would call them universities. That's what all America did early, right? When they'd only been here the first 100 years, 50 years, 60 years, all right? Is that so does everybody else. It's what you hope to be, huh? And you've got to affirm what you hope to be and keep affirming it, but put your resources there when you open your mouth, all right? Because there's no sense of talking about it if you didn't intend to do it, right? Because it's in the action we find out who we are. It's in the action we find out what the nation's like. It's in the action we find out what our enemies are really like, right? And they're not always as bad as we think, and we're not always as good as we think, all right? And it makes all the difference in the world, right? And if you
Well, that actually provides a nice segue to the next question. I was looking at one of your bios, and I noticed that you had advised 5 presidents: Lyndon Johnson, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and Barack Obama. And of course, Ronald Reagan kind of stood out because he was the only Republican in the group. So
he should have stood out for that reason, but a lot more reasons, right?
Well, there were others.
Is that when you start your campaign off
In Philadelphia,
right?
Mississippi, yeah.
That's right. And in the city in Mississippi that killed civil rights workers, right? And you're running for president of the United States, and so you looked at that little town in Mississippi. And here's the guy that says they're all right, and he's going to be in charge of your nation. What do you expect? Decency? Not at all. Nor did we get it in terms of our race, right? We had to be just like the other, getting what we could from what was left over from what we were surrounded with, all right? So the rest of them were better than where I come from. But I tell you what I've discovered, the richer the Republican is, the more he wants the guy you mentioned. Because he opened more paths for the rich to get richer than he ever did for caring about the poor and the left out and those that were struggling to live. All right? And that's what it's all about. That's why we've needed a black president, and that's why they're still fighting him.
Right.
And the people that are fighting him are the richest of the Republicans, because they don't have to suffer like the rest of America, right? And I don't care whether you're black or white, all right? If you're not rich or very well off, right, you're not truly desirable. You know what I did today? I was sitting by a guy that I wasn't even thinking about him as black or white or Republican or Democrat or all that stuff. But he started cleaning out his the bag of stuff he had, right? And everything he had in it was just Republican publication, right? Is that you could everything in there was dogging Obama. Destroying what's that? Obamacare. Oh, that's it. I almost forgot it. I don't get to hear it so much. Is that and by the time and he must have brought 15 different publications out of his bag, right? And he only tore up one though. But he put the rest of them and that's the one I want. I want to see what would make him tear it up, right? But he put the rest of them in the thing in front of you in that seat on the back of the seat, right? And so I waited until everybody had gone, and then I just picked up all of them and took them with me. It's reading for the next couple of days. But it's not reading for the next couple of days, it's thinking for the next couple of days. Because what I've got that I don't normally get is the mind of the right. And you've got to know those who hate you as well as those who love you. And so that you can pull their stuff apart as well as they can put you down because you don't have enough money or enough this or enough the other. All right? And because you see, every election for us is life or death. It's suffering or advancement. It's that simple, all right? We know we're not treated the same in this society. So but if you're the average white person in the society, you're going to be treated like the average white person in the society, right? Whether either one of them wins, you may not be treated as well if one does and the other doesn't, right? But for us, every one of them, we go up and down, right? Is that you know? But people know they're wrong. They're not idiots. They're not totally ethically dumb, right? Is that one of the guys that had a Southern strategy? Remember the great Southern strategy? Now the point being is that he got cancer, and he went around telling everybody he was sorry. He talked about it, right? And because it was designed that black people wouldn't get anywhere, right? But he would never say that until he got cancer. I would like to say God was at work, except that he would be worked overtime if that was if that was the deal, right? Is that now? He went around on TV and in newspapers and all of it. Is that he went around telling people that he was sorry that he had said it, right? He wanted everyone to know that he was wrong, right? That didn't change most of them. They just blamed him for being rotten in the first place, but they didn't call it that. Is that next?
So, well, this will be my last question before I open it up for the audience. Yesterday, you were quoted in the paper as saying, I'm going to paraphrase here, that winning the Presidential Medal of Freedom gave you a bigger platform. So I kind of wanted to conclude by asking who your new audience is and give you a chance to say your first words to them.
It gives me a chance to create a bigger audience.
Okay.
And that's important. What was one of the great lines during the Civil Rights Movement about being, I can't come up with the line now. It was one of Martin's lines, but if good people would be good people, right, is really what it means, right? Then we could all live better. But as long as we who are supposed to be good are not good, then everything goes down the drain, right? And that part of our struggle is to make each one of us, black, white, yellow, pink, or polka dot, a better person. And so we got to understand each other in order to do that. And we got to understand the faiths that we live by, actually live by. In order to really make the moves that are necessary. See, freeing people makes everybody better, right? If you take it seriously, right? If you just say, oh yes, it would be nice if, only in the action.
Well, thank you for answering my questions.
Miss Doris Derby is in the house, and I want to, before I ask you this question, I need to say a funny story. My name is John Dew. They call me a civil rights lawyer. I know C.T. Vivian and Jose Williams in St. Augustine. I love everybody. I love everybody.
In my heart.
I love everybody in my heart. Well, that is very important.
St. Augustine, Florida.
That's right. What had happened, I was doing some work in Canton, Mississippi. And I didn't follow rules of SNCC and COFO. And at night, I saw a long line of cars following me. So I rushed into Doris's house, like a safe house, halfway house, which was on 49, right? And I told her, the plan is after my butt. I need to stay here overnight. Yes, I told her that, and you have to believe that now. So, all right. So I stayed overnight, and then went to the court, filed my petition, went to Atlanta, and Wiley Branton said, "You got to go to St. Augustine." So I flew to St. Augustine, and I got to the church late at night. And as you know, in our freedom rallies, the practice was to leave the church, try to go to the courthouse to register to vote. And there'd be a long line of deputy troopers with nigger sticks, with red sticks to beat you down. So we were coming out of this church singing this song, "We love everybody, we love everybody." And I see this whole line of state troopers. And I said, no, I'm an attorney. I'm not supposed to get beaten up. I'm not supposed to be arrested. But all at once, those state troopers got on our side and marched with us through the community. What had happened, an injunction had just been filed and won by Brian Simpson, ordering the governor of the state of Florida to protect the demonstrations. So, so that was important.
What year was it?
This was 1964, just before they found the bodies, of Sherman, Goodman, and Cheney. My question to you, and I called you to tell you I was going to ask you this question. I attended the meeting last night, Brian Ritchie, dealing with what she calls the prison nation. America has become a prison nation, which should not be, it shouldn't be surprising because America was organized as a prison colony, just like Australia was for its rejects.
Keep going.
And of course, these rejects, through their, psychology of the inferior feeling they're superior, the rest of the story. My question to you, and I told you I was going to ask you this question. The work that you did in Chicago through SCLC, working with the gangs in Chicago, where they sat around a table like it was the United Nations, wearing their different colors. Do you believe that we need to do this kind of program again? Now, at that time, it's very funny, but Nixon supported this because he supported black business. So these gang people were, instead of shooting each other, were involved in business activities.
Well,
and what do you think is the solution to our being a prison nation?
Oh, is that education is the answer to both of those, and they can be done at the same time. All right? Is if we create a curriculum for blacks in prison and we include an education in business, all right? So while they're learning how to better read and write, they're also learning more about business, right? That's the dual thing. But I tell you what, is that can't be the goal. The goal has got to be that we educate everyone we can that's in prison and should be out. There's some in there that should be there, right? And if you don't believe that, think about it, right? All right. Now, is that, and I'm not talking about just left out black people, white people who want to join it too. You get my point? Because the more we're educated together, the more we can learn to love each other, right, and care for each other. Bernard Lafayette, down in one of the South American countries, we've been there 2 or 3 times. I forget. Colombia. In Colombia, right, is that the guys in jails there were all Colombians, right? but they were in different gangs. And what Bernard did was to teach them nonviolence. They wanted to learn because they were all in jail together, and they realized that they were going to kill each other together. So they better learn nonviolence, and they wanted to bring their families in too, right? He did a great job, right? Because, and what I'm talking about there is the fact that guys like Jeff Fort, and I want you to get some background on that, those who don't, right? Is that when you're talking about Jeff Fort, his gang, we don't know what gangs are in this town. Let me see. That's exactly right, Rev. Yeah, that's right. And you sit at the table if you controlled 1,000 young guys, 1,000. You get that? All right. That means 10 100s, right? And each one of those hundreds had a leader, right? But they all had one commander, right? Is that, I'm talking about unity, you see what I mean? But I'm talking about the potential and possibilities of really doing a job that way. How do we get the guys educated in prisons? You got to think about models like that, right? But we've got to be together in how it gets done, all right? Otherwise, you trip yourself up, right? Because it's just like we had the Stones, the D's, and the Lords, right? 20,000 in one, 12,000 in another, and 8 in the other one, right? First thing we had to do is teach them nonviolence, right? And we finally got them to the point where that they said we're no longer the north side or the south side. We're the black side, right? In other words, they united, right? And that they were willing to then go out and take on the buildings trade union. By the time we finished, we had daily signing off on 20,000 jobs for young black guys, right? 4,000 a year, 5,000 a year for 4 years, right? Now, the thing is that if they hadn't got, but they had to be continuously worked with, but that's no worse than guys outside. I just left Peoria, Illinois, right? When I was in Peoria, I just happened to be there at the time. I wasn't all that great with it, right? But I loved it. I mean, I loved the idea. That was my first nonviolent direct action stuff was in Peoria. And in Peoria, we took on, but NAACP took on, and I was vice president in NAACP in Peoria, right? But the guy who really was the guy who headed it, right? And he was just a little guy who was a janitor downtown, all right? But we decided to take on, new law had been passed, we decided to take on Caterpillar tractor. Biggest thing in downstate Illinois all the way to the tip where it meets Kentucky, right? All right? And we took on, and he really did the taking on. We said, yes, sir. And we agree with what he said. You understand what I mean, all right? He really was the driving force of it, right? And he went down and put his brushes and brooms in a closet, right? And had to have the meeting with the guy at noon because he couldn't get off for anything but his lunch. You know what? Went over and tacked him to the wall, right? Now, the point being is we got a lot more power than we think. And we can use the power that we really have if we want to, right? And that it doesn't make any difference how much education you've got if you've got the deep desire to be free and to see that other people are taken care of for no other reason than they're people, right? You see, that's the number one piece of education. And if you got that, you got a chance at the rest, right? And I tell you what, is that guys like the Stones control the whole South Side. You know what one of the Stones said when finally everybody agreed to come together? One of the Stones said, well, maybe we'll let the disciples see the lake. But you understand what I'm saying? Is that if you owned a business, how would you like 10 guys working for you that can control 100 guys apiece? Pardon me, Rev.
Yes, right there.
Doc, wait a minute. Doc, did you? Okay, good. All right. Rev?
Man, I know you tired. It's amazing that you can sit up there and still look like you're fresh. Y'all ought to give him a hand. This man been up for 3 straight nights, and he's and at 65, look how good he looks. CT, you and I have discussed this sometime, and I think it'll be quite meaningful for the audience here tonight. A key question, and you know, I was in the student movement there in '60 in Nashville, 53 years ago, and all at Tennessee State. But all of what you and the students and all that we've gone through, and we've talked about this. I want to ask one question, and I think this is a question that we all need. Given what we went through, the jails, and what we see now with the baggy pants, cussing out, calling them W's and B's, and everything that we see in reality, one question: would you do it again? That's the question that you and I continue to ask ourselves. Yeah. Given the crap that we see out here today, would you do it again?
Yes.
All right, then. Give him a hand if he'd do it again.
I tell you why. I tell you why. Because I think it's partly our fault that they walk around like that, right? I think that the real thing was that we didn't give them anything to fight for, that we went home and sat down and said, well, you guys take it now, right? Is that instead of breaking, this is why I have this meeting with these guys. We don't have a lot of kids every Saturday morning, but we have up to 16 to 20, right? It's always thought. But it's been worth going up there every Saturday morning, right? And that I'm in town, and I'm in town most of the time now, so that's no excuse either way, right? But is that, and those kids keep coming. Now, some of them started because their mother needed to shop on Saturday morning, right? So, you know, you don't kid yourself about any of it, right? But the point being is they come anyway. And they're learning, and they're better than they were, and they get some values, and they meet guys, and that just are there because they want to, because they didn't have parents in one hand, right, or many of them, right. But the main thing is that their fathers are not in the house, and they just need to sit around in a circle. We sit around in a circle, right, and we talk about anything they want to talk about. If they don't want to talk about it, we don't bring it up. The point is that, and they have learned and felt better about themselves and doing things that they wouldn't have been doing before, and committed to different kinds of ways of working for the rest of their lives. Right? That's why the guys that stand out are the guys that are artists. Because we got a whole arts program. Don Rivers is in the back. Don is the person that puts the program together. It started as an after-school program, right? And the principal said many of these guys don't ever have any kind of man in their lives, right? And would you add them to your program? You know, any of them that comes in, right? If they didn't want to come, they didn't come, right? And and Don has been there for 4 solid years, and the rest of the guys come once a week. Don's there every day, right? To make certain, and he's got $250,000 worth of musical instruments that people have given him, right? because he lost his last million, and he no longer has that million that he thought he would work with. He's had to wait until people give it to him. But people have given him $250,000 worth of musical equipment, right? And they work with it. And what it has done, when you see them act, when you see them do programs, when you see them do things today, when they go out somewhere to be a part of something that's going on, it's marvelous, right? It's like a guy that my son, when as I said, he had cerebral palsy, right? And you could go there. I'll tell you now, I don't need all the background story, but you could go there, and these two guys that ran two guys that ran a steel mill. They owned it, right? And they set up this ideal place for people that had bodies crushed or in accidents or was born like my son was with cerebral palsy, right? And we got to be friends. He said we'd sit around and talk sometimes after I was go over it before while I was waiting to take my son back home. And he said, says, my friends tell me, because he was rich, he's well off. He wasn't sloppy rich because he didn't keep all the money. He spent it on good things, right? And he said, my friends tell me, says, you ought to buy you a yacht and go around. And he said, I listened to them. Says, but says, every time I see a kid walk out that door, that's my yacht. Mm-hmm. See, is that it's all down to what kind of people you want to be. You can, oh, pardon me. You know what I'm going to say. Okay.
We have time for one final question right back there.
Mr. Vivian, my name is Clayton Williams. I'm a 46-year-old black man from Mississippi. And only into the last 3 years of my life that I've started to study the plight of blacks in America through Freedom Riders. And I brought my daughter here so that she can learn about the struggle that took place. But what I find very almost kind of hard to believe is that I share this with other people, other blacks in the community and other blacks around, and either they have little interest or they don't really gravitate to it. And what it has done for me is given me an understanding of where we are by Freedom Riders, Slavery by Another Name, Slavery in the Making of America. It has helped me to understand where we are and how we got there and why we don't have certain things in the community, certain things in the country. Now I understand, okay, I understand this is why. How do we get this out to us, not everyone else, to more blacks in communities so they can understand this is where we are and how we get from where we are to where we need to be?
You know what? We were, before Martin King, we were all just like what you're talking about, right? Martin gave us a method and something to do with it. All of the great leaders in Black America have shared with us how to really open the world around them, right? And we've only had 5, right? Great ones. And every one of them had a strategy. We can use Martin's strategy and get something done. It's in the action. You got to give people something to do, right? Is that and we got to meet to get something to do, not just to sit there and talk about how bad things are. And I was and it's too bad about Joe and all that kind of stuff. See, you know, I mean, who needs it, right? The point being, we all know that, right? Is that can we talk about something that changes things, but they've got to do it, right? How to organize people so they too will do something. But if you're not organizing them, they don't have any reason to believe you're any better than they are, so you're just talking. You know my point? And this is where we are right now. We're just talking. But we feel that there's enough of us good enough so that we can answer the questions. Black's human, yes, man. Let me show you the great doctors in the country, right? So what, right? Is the real point. What are you doing, and what are you doing now? And where are we doing it, and is it solving a problem? See what I mean? Was it solving a problem? Is that, and if we are as bad as we say we are, there should be enough problems to work on. All right? And how do we cut it? How do we think of it? How do we solve it? If we're as bright as we think we are, because that's all it takes. Martin had a strategy, and that's what did it. We've got that strategy open to us. We got the strategy of each one of the great ones that have gone before. We've got something to work with, our old history, because it worked, right? So we know it's good stuff. It worked, right? There we go, Doc. It gets down. It's in the action that we find the answers to questions like this. It's in the coming together and then being united enough to back it up, all right? And we shouldn't expect anybody else to do it. We shouldn't. Nobody's going to do what you won't start to do, try to do, be involved in, right? And you'll get mad at them if it's only them, right? They're now around here trying to do what we know better than they do. Well, if you know better than they do, do it, all right? But it would be a lot better if we could do it together. Yeah. Because none of us are pure.
Well, I'll take that as a call to action. Unfortunately, we have to stop right here, do we? Or can we ask more questions? Okay, sir.
Yeah. Did you?
Last question.
Oh, I see.
Actually, this is not a question. This is a comment. I'm just so blessed to be here in your presence. I just feel like you're some type of superstar, at least for me. When I found out you were going to be here, I was like, oh my God, I got to go. So I just wanted to say thank you, because the work that you did and others like you has made the quality of my life so much better. And I respect and honor you and admire you. And I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. So with that, thank you very much. Thank you all.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.